The evening sun cast long shadows through the tall windows of the Riverside Music Academy as Elena pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway. Her rubber-soled shoes squeaked softly against the polished floor, the only sound in the now empty building. It was 6:30, and the last of the students had rushed out 30 minutes ago, their expensive instrument cases swinging at their sides, already chatting about weekend plans and upcoming recitals. Elena had been working here for 3 years now. 3 years of mopping these floors, dusting these pianos, and emptying trash cans filled with crumpled sheet music that cost more than her lunch. She didn't mind the work, not really. It paid the bills, and there was something peaceful about being here after everyone left. The building felt different when it was quiet. Less intimidating. More like it could belong to anyone, even someone like her. She stopped outside practice room 7 and pulled out her spray bottle and cloth. Through the small window in the door, she could see the beautiful black grand piano sitting in the center of the room, its polished surface reflecting the last rays of daylight. Elena had cleaned this room hundreds of times, but she always paused before entering. There was something sacred about these spaces, these rooms where music came to life every day. As she cleaned, she hummed softly to herself. An old melody her grandmother used to sing, mixed with fragments of pieces she'd heard students practicing. Her hands moved automatically, wiping down the music stand, carefully dusting around the keys without touching them. She never touched the keys. That wasn't her place. The academy was getting ready for something big. Elena had heard the instructors talking about it for weeks now. The annual spring gala, they called it, a fancy fundraiser where rich people paid $1,000 a ticket to sip champagne and watch the best students perform. The staff had been given extra tasks, extra hours. Everything had to be perfect. She finished room 7 and moved on to room 8, then 9. Each room looked almost identical, but Elena knew their small differences. Room 8 had a slightly squeaky bench. Room 9 got the best afternoon light. Room 12 had a small scratch on the side of the piano that someone had tried to hide with a marker. By 7:15, she'd finished the practice rooms and moved to the main hallway. That's when she heard it. Music. Coming from the advanced studio at the end of the hall. Someone was still here, playing something beautiful and complicated. Elena slowed her cart, not wanting the wheels to squeak and disturb whoever was practicing. She shouldn't stop. She had work to finish. But her feet carried her closer to the door anyway, drawn by the sound. She stood outside, her hand resting on the handle of her cart, and just listened. The piece was something classical, full of cascading notes that seemed to tumble over each other like water in a stream. Whoever was playing had talent. Real talent. Without thinking, Elena's fingers began to move at her sides, mimicking the patterns she heard. Left hand, right hand, the invisible dance of someone who understood not just the notes but the feeling behind them. She closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. And for just a moment, she wasn't standing in a hallway in her cleaning uniform. She was somewhere else entirely. Well, what do we think we're doing? The voice shattered the moment like dropped glass. Elena's eyes flew open, her hands falling to her sides. Standing a few feet away, a slight smirk on his face, was Victor Hartley. He was new to the academy, only been teaching here for a few months. His uncle owned the place, which everyone knew was the real reason he'd gotten the job. The students complained about him constantly, saying he was harsh and unfair, but he was family, so he stayed. "I'm sorry. I was just cleaning," Elena said quickly, gripping her cart tighter. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone." Victor walked closer, his expensive shoes clicking on the marble. He was dressed like he always was, in a fitted suit that probably cost more than Elena made in a month. His dark hair was styled perfectly, and he had that look some people got when they'd never been told no in their entire lives. "Disturb anyone?" He glanced at the closed door of the practice room. No, I'm just curious. You seemed very involved with the music. Were you enjoying it?" There was something in his tone that made Elena uncomfortable, like he was setting a trap and she'd already stepped halfway into it. "It's beautiful," she said carefully. "Whoever's playing is very talented." Victor crossed his arms, looking her up and down in a way that made her want to disappear. "You know, I've noticed you before, always lingering around the practice rooms. Taking your time cleaning. Sometimes you stand outside the doors for quite a while." Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I just want to do a thorough job." "Of course." His smirk widened. "Tell me something. Do you play? The piano, I mean." The question hung in the air between them. Elena knew the right answer, the safe answer. She should say no, should make an excuse and push her cart away, finish her work and go home to her small apartment and her daughter, and forget this conversation ever happened. But something in Victor's expression, the way he was looking at her like she was a joke he was just beginning to tell, made her hesitate just a second too long. "I used to," she said quietly. "A long time ago." Victor's eyebrows shot up with exaggerated surprise. "Did you now? How fascinating. And where did you study? Juilliard, Curtis, or perhaps," he waved a hand dismissively, "some community center program?" Elena said nothing. She'd learned long ago that people like Victor didn't actually want answers to their questions. They just wanted opportunities to hear themselves talk. "You know what I think?" Victor continued, warming to his subject. "I think everyone believes they have musical talent. They hear a beautiful piece, they tap their fingers along, and they think, 'I could do that.' But there's a rather large difference between appreciating music and creating it. Between listening and performing. Don't you agree?" "I should get back to work," Elena said, starting to push her cart forward. Yes, of course." Victor stepped aside, but she could feel his eyes following her down the hall. "Do your job. That's what you're good at, after all." Elena kept walking, her jaw clenched tight. She could still hear him chuckling behind her as she turned the corner. Her hands were shaking slightly as she pulled out her cleaning supplies for the next room, and she hated that. Hated that he'd gotten under her skin. Hated that she'd let him see even a glimpse of who she used to be. She worked mechanically for the next hour, finishing the remaining rooms and the faculty offices. The building was fully dark now, lit only by the emergency lights and the glow from the parking lot outside. Elena gathered her things from the supply closet, pulled on her jacket and headed for the exit. But as she pushed open the heavy front door, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted tonight. The way Victor had looked at her, that calculating expression behind his smirk, she'd seen that look before. On bullies in school, on people who enjoyed having power over others. Elena walked to her bus stop, her bag heavy on her shoulder. 20 minutes until the next bus. She sat on the bench and pulled out her phone, scrolling through a message from her daughter about homework and dinner plans. Normal life. Real life. But a small part of her, the part she usually kept locked away, couldn't stop thinking about those pianos sitting in the dark building behind her. Couldn't stop her fingers from twitching with muscle memory she'd thought she'd forgotten. She had no idea that in a few weeks, Victor would make good on the trap she'd sensed tonight. That her quiet life was about to change in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. That one moment of humiliation would become something else entirely. But that night, she just waited for her bus and tried to forget the sound of his laughter echoing down the empty hall. The night of the spring gala arrived faster than Elena had expected. The past 3 weeks had been a blur of extra cleaning shifts, polishing every surface until it gleamed, hanging decorations, and helping set up chairs in the grand performance hall. The entire staff had been working overtime to make sure everything was perfect. Elena stood in the back hallway near the kitchen, adjusting her uniform one more time. The academy had given all the staff crisp white shirts and black vests to wear for the event. She felt like a penguin, but at least everyone looked the same. Professional. Invisible. The way staff were supposed to be at events like this. Through the door, she could hear the low hum of conversation and clinking glasses. The gala had started an hour ago, and the hall was packed with people who had more money than Elena would see in her entire lifetime. She'd caught glimpses of them as she passed through earlier. Women in glittering gowns that probably cost as much as a car. Men in perfectly tailored tuxedos. Everyone laughing and networking, treating the whole thing like it was just another Tuesday evening. "Elena, we need more water pitchers on the side tables," called Robert, the head of facilities. He was a kind man in his 50s who'd worked at the academy for 20 years. "Can you handle the east side?" "On it." Elena nodded, grabbing 2 crystal pitchers from the catering station. They were heavy and cold in her hands as she pushed through the door into the main hall. The space was transformed. Thousands of tiny lights had been strung across the ceiling, making it look like a starry sky. The stage was lit with soft golden spotlights, and the grand piano sat in the center like a jewel. Round tables covered in white linens filled the room, each with elaborate floral centerpieces. It was beautiful, Elena had to admit, like something from a movie. She moved quietly between the tables, refilling water glasses and replacing empty pitchers. Most people didn't even glance at her. She was part of the background, just another element of the evening that was supposed to run smoothly and unnoticed. On stage, a teenage girl was playing a complicated piece by Chopin. She was good, technically precise. Though Elena noticed, she rushed through some of the emotional sections. The audience applauded politely when she finished, and the Academy director, a tall man with silver hair named Mr. Hartley, stepped up to the microphone to introduce the next performer. Elena had just finished filling glasses at table 12 when she heard a voice she recognized. Victor was standing near the bar with a group of his friends, all young men who looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. They were laughing about something, drinks in hand, clearly enjoying themselves. She tried to move past them quickly, but Victor's voice rose above the others. I'm telling you, these events are all the same. Same stuffy pieces, same nervous students. Where's the entertainment? Maybe you should perform, Vic, one of his friends said. Show them how it's really done. Victor laughed, but there was an edge to it. Elena knew, like everyone else at the Academy, that Victor wasn't actually a very good pianist. He was adequate, competent even, but nothing special. His position came from his last name, not his talent. Perhaps later, Victor said, taking a sip of his drink. Or perhaps we need something more interesting. Something unexpected. Elena felt his eyes land on her before she could turn away. She watched his expression change, saw the moment an idea formed in his mind. That same calculating look from 3 weeks ago appeared on his face, and her stomach dropped. Excuse me, gentlemen, Victor said, setting down his glass. He walked toward her with quick, purposeful steps. Elena's hands tightened on the empty pitcher she was carrying. Elena, isn't it? He said loudly enough that several nearby tables turned to look. Still working hard, I see. Yes, sir, she said quietly, trying to edge past him. But Victor moved to block her path. More people were looking now, curious about what was happening. On stage, a young man had just started playing, but the attention in their section of the room was shifting. You know, I've been thinking about our conversation, Victor continued, his voice carrying, about how you used to play piano. I think that's wonderful. Really wonderful. Elena said nothing. Her heart was starting to pound. In fact, Victor raised his voice even more, turning slightly to address the growing number of people watching. I think we should celebrate that. We talk so much at this academy about music being accessible to everyone, about how it crosses all boundaries. But do we really mean it? He was walking toward the stage now, and Elena realized with horror that he expected her to follow. Mr. Hartley had paused the program, looking confused at his nephew's interruption. Ladies and gentlemen, Victor called out, and now the entire room was watching. The young man at the piano had stopped playing. If I could have your attention for just a moment. We have someone special here tonight, someone who represents what this academy is really about. Elena felt frozen in place. She could see Robert across the room, concern written all over his face, but he was too far away to help. Other staff members had stopped what they were doing, watching with worried expressions. You there. Victor gestured to Elena with an exaggerated wave. Please come up here. Don't be shy. There was a horrible moment of silence. Elena could feel hundreds of eyes on her, could see the confusion and curiosity on all those wealthy faces. Victor's friends by the bar were grinning, clearly in on whatever joke this was meant to be. I really can't, Elena started to say, but her voice came out too quiet. Nonsense, Victor said, his tone friendly but his eyes hard. This woman works here at our academy. She cleans the very practice rooms where our talented students work every day. And do you know what else? She plays piano, or at least she used to. Isn't that right? Elena felt her face burning. She wanted to disappear, wanted the floor to open up and swallow her, but she also felt something else rising in her chest, a spark of anger at being put on display like this, at being used as entertainment for people who saw her as nothing more than help. Come on now, Victor pressed, and there was an edge of challenge in his voice now. We're all friends here. Just play us something, anything. Show everyone that music really is for everybody. Mr. Hartley was frowning now, clearly uncomfortable but not stopping his nephew. The room had gone completely silent except for the soft clink of ice in glasses. A few people were whispering to each other. Victor's friends were barely containing their laughter. Elena looked at the stage, at that beautiful grand piano sitting there under the lights. She looked at Victor's smug face, at the expectant crowd, at the other staff members watching with sympathy and helplessness. She thought about her daughter at home, about the bills she needed to pay, about the job she couldn't afford to lose. But she also thought about the years of practice. The calluses she used to have on her fingertips, the way music used to feel when it flowed through her. The person she'd been before life had demanded she become someone else. Slowly, with as much dignity as she could gather, Elena set down her pitcher on the nearest table. She walked toward the stage, her legs feeling like they might give out at any moment. The room seemed to stretch forever, every step taking an eternity. She could hear Victor following behind her, probably still saying something, but the blood was rushing too loud in her ears to make out the words. She climbed the 3 steps to the stage. The lights were brighter up here, hot on her face. The piano looked bigger somehow, more intimidating than the ones she'd dusted for 3 years. She sat down on the bench, the wood smooth and solid beneath her. Her hands were shaking as she placed them on the keys. She could feel the cool ivory under her fingers, could sense the weight of the keys, the possibility contained in this instrument. The room behind her was holding its breath, waiting to see her fail, waiting for the entertainment Victor had promised them. Elena closed her eyes. She took one deep breath, then another, and in that moment something shifted inside her. The fear didn't disappear, but it transformed into something else. Something stronger. She opened her eyes, positioned her hands, and began to play. The first note rang out clear and strong, cutting through the silence like a bell. Elena's right hand found the opening melody while her left established the foundation, and suddenly the years fell away. Her fingers remembered what her mind had tried to forget. She was playing Rachmaninoff, the second piano concerto, one of the most demanding pieces in the classical repertoire. It wasn't a choice she'd made consciously. Her hands had simply gone there, to the piece she'd once played so many times she could do it in her sleep. The piece she'd been practicing the week her whole life changed. The technical passages that made even advanced students stumble flowed from her fingers like breathing. Her left hand moved in powerful sweeping motions while her right hand danced across the higher registers. The muscle memory was still there, buried under years of mopping floors and washing dishes, but perfect and complete. But it wasn't just technical skill. That's what made the room go absolutely silent within the first 30 seconds. There was something else in the music. Pain, loss, beauty that hurt to hear because it was so honest. Every note carried weight, carried feeling, carried the story of someone who'd had to give up everything they loved and had somehow survived it. Elena's eyes were closed now. She wasn't in the performance hall anymore. She was 19 years old, playing in a competition she'd won. She was 20, performing at her scholarship audition. She was 22, playing her mother's favorite piece while her mother could still remember what music was. She was every age and no age, just someone pouring their heart out through ivory and strings and wood. The room had ceased to exist for her. She didn't see Victor's smile sliding off his face like melting wax. She didn't see his friends exchanging confused glances, their laughter dying in their throats. She didn't see the wealthy guests setting down their champagne glasses, their conversations forgotten. She didn't see students who'd performed earlier that night staring with their mouths open, humbled and awed. She just played. The piece built and swelled, the melody climbing higher and more intense. Her whole body moved with the music now, swaying slightly, her shoulders and back engaged in the performance. This was what people didn't understand about truly playing piano. It wasn't just your fingers. It was everything. Your whole self poured into the instrument. Then she did something that made several musicians in the audience gasp quietly. She began to deviate from the written score. Not mistakes, not errors, but intentional improvisation. She took Rachmaninoff's themes and began weaving in her own variations, her own voice. Jazz influences crept in. Unexpected harmonies, rhythms that shouldn't work but somehow did. She was having a conversation with the composer across a century, saying, "I hear you, and here's what I have to add." It was breathtaking. It was the kind of thing you couldn't teach, couldn't fake. Either you had that deep understanding of music, that ability to create in the moment, or you didn't. And Elena had it in abundance. She played for 4 minutes straight, though it felt like both seconds and hours. The final variation she'd created, built to a crescendo that filled every corner of the massive hall, then slowly, gently came back down to earth. The last few notes were soft, almost whisper quiet, each one deliberately placed like stones in a garden. When she played the final chord and lifted her hands from the keys, the silence that followed was profound. 3 seconds passed. Then 5. The room seemed to be holding its breath. Then the applause started. It began with one person, then another, then suddenly everyone was on their feet. The sound was like thunder, like waves crashing, filling the hall from floor to ceiling. It wasn't the polite applause they'd given the students earlier. This was something else entirely. People were cheering, actually cheering, at a formal gala. Elena opened her eyes slowly, blinking in the bright stage lights. For a moment, she couldn't process what was happening. The standing ovation, the faces below her showing shock and amazement and joy, the way people were turning to each other with expressions of disbelief. She looked down at her hands still resting on the keys and felt the trembling start. She'd done it. After all these years, she'd actually done it. In the third row, an elderly woman was crying openly, not bothering to wipe away her tears. She was standing like everyone else, applauding so hard her hands must have hurt. Elena didn't recognize her, but she would soon learn exactly who this woman was. Near the bar, Victor stood frozen, his face pale. His friends had stopped laughing. They looked uncomfortable now, like they'd been part of something cruel that had backfired spectacularly. One of them was even applauding, though he looked confused about why. Mr. Hartley, the academy director, had his hand over his mouth, his eyes wide. He was shaking his head slowly, like he couldn't believe what he'd just witnessed. The applause went on and on. Elena stood up from the piano bench on shaky legs, unsure of what to do. Should she bow? Should she leave? She'd never felt so exposed and so alive at the same time. Then the elderly woman from the third row was moving. She climbed the stage steps, with surprising speed for someone who had to be in her 70s, and she walked straight to Elena. Up close, Elena could see the woman's elegant dress, her carefully styled gray hair, the intelligence and emotion in her eyes. "Elena?" the woman said, her voice trembling. "Elena Alvarez? Is that really you?" Elena stared at her, and suddenly recognition dawned. "Dr. Chen?" The elderly woman let out a sound between a laugh and a sob and pulled Elena into a tight embrace. The audience watched, bewildered, as their expensive donor hugged the cleaning woman on stage. Dr. Chen pulled back, holding Elena by the shoulders, examining her face like she was trying to memorize it. "I can't believe it," Dr. Chen said, loud enough for the nearby microphone to pick up her words. "I thought I'd never see you again. I thought you were lost to music forever." She turned to face the audience, still gripping Elena's hand like she was afraid she might disappear. The applause had died down now, replaced by intense curiosity. Everyone wanted to know what was happening, who this woman was, why she could play like that. 20 years ago, Dr. Chen announced, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "I taught piano at the Manhattan Conservatory. In all my years of teaching, over 4 decades, I had many talented students. But this woman..." She squeezed Elena's hand. "This woman was the most gifted pianist I have ever taught, and I've taught students who went on to win international competitions, students who perform at Carnegie Hall, students whose names you would recognize." The audience murmured, confusion mixing with fascination. Elena felt tears starting to build behind her eyes. "Elena won every competition she entered," Dr. Chen continued. "Every single one. She had a full scholarship to Juilliard waiting for her. Critics were calling her a once-in-a-generation talent. She was going to be somebody. She was going to change the world of classical music." Dr. Chen's voice cracked slightly. "And then she disappeared. She deferred her scholarship and never came back. I tried to find her, to reach out, but she was gone. And now I learn she's been here, cleaning floors, while that instrument sat untouched by someone who could make it sing like that." The silence in the room was different now. People were looking at Elena with new eyes, not as entertainment, not as the help, but as someone real, someone with a story they didn't know. Victor, still standing near the bar, looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. The cruel joke he'd planned had exploded in his face in the worst possible way. Or the best possible way, depending on how you looked at it. "What happened?" Dr. Chen asked Elena softly, though the microphone still caught it. "Why did you leave?" Why didn't you come back?" Elena took a shaky breath. The tears were flowing freely now, but she didn't care anymore. The whole room was waiting for her answer, and suddenly she was tired of hiding. Tired of pretending that part of her life had never existed. "My mother got sick," Elena said simply, her voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying in the silent hall. "Early onset Alzheimer's. She was only 52. I was her only family, so I stayed to take care of her. The scholarship deferment became permanent because I needed to work. She passed away 5 years later, but by then I had my daughter, and bills, and no way back." She looked out at all those faces watching her. "I never stopped playing, though. Late at night at home on an old keyboard I bought at a thrift store. In my head while I worked. The music never left me. I just had to leave the stage. And I took this job because I wanted to be near music again, even if I couldn't make it anymore. Even if all I could do was clean the rooms where other people got to live the dream I gave up." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Several people in the audience were crying now. Even some of the students looked shaken, suddenly, understanding that the world was more complicated than they'd realized. Dr. Chen turned to Mr. Hartley. "We need to talk," she said firmly. "Right now." The gala never really recovered its formal atmosphere after that. Oh, they tried. Mr. Hartley quickly arranged for the next student performer to take the stage, and the program continued. But no one was really paying attention anymore. Small groups of people clustered together, whispering intensely. Eyes kept drifting back to where Elena stood off to the side of the stage with Dr. Chen, the older woman still holding her hand like she might vanish if she let go. Elena felt like she was floating outside her own body. The last 20 minutes felt like something that had happened to someone else. Had she really just played in front of hundreds of people? Had her former teacher really just told everyone her story? It all seemed impossible, like a dream she might wake up from at any moment. "Elena, dear, are you all right?" Dr. Chen asked gently, studying her face with concern. "I'm sorry if I overwhelmed you. I was just so shocked, so happy to see you again." "I'm okay," Elena managed to say, though her voice shook. "I just can't believe you're here. Of all the places, all the nights." "I've been a donor to this academy for 5 years," Dr. Chen explained. "After I retired from the conservatory, I wanted to support music education. If only I'd known you were here." She shook her head, her expression both sad and determined. "We're going to fix this, I promise you, we're going to fix this." Before Elena could ask what she meant, a small crowd began to gather around them. First came a woman in a silver gown who introduced herself as a concert promoter. Then a man who owned a chain of music venues. Then another donor who funded scholarships. They all wanted to talk to Elena, wanted to know more about her, wanted to offer things she couldn't quite process. Opportunities. Chances. The kind of doors that had closed 20 years ago suddenly swinging open again. "Please, please." Dr. Chen held up a hand, protective of her former student. "Give us some space. Elena needs a moment. If you want to help, leave your cards with me, and we'll be in touch." Reluctantly, the crowd dispersed, though Elena could feel their eyes on her from across the room. She noticed the other staff members watching too, their expressions a mixture of shock and support. Robert gave her an encouraging thumbs up from near the kitchen door. Then she saw Victor. He was trying to leave, edging toward the exit with his friends, clearly hoping to slip away unnoticed. But Mr. Hartley had spotted him too. The director's face was stormy as he intercepted his nephew, gripping him by the arm and pulling him aside. Even from a distance, Elena could see Victor's confident posture crumbling as his uncle spoke to him in sharp, quiet tones. "That young man should be ashamed of him." "Elf," Dr. Chen said, following Elena's gaze. "What he did was cruel and unprofessional. Using you as entertainment like that." "He didn't know," Elena said softly, though she wasn't sure why she was defending him. Maybe because part of her was grateful. If Victor hadn't put her on that stage, none of this would be happening. The thought was confusing and complicated. "Not knowing doesn't excuse cruelty," Dr. Chen said firmly. "And between you and me, I've heard things about that boy. He's not a good teacher. The students complain about him constantly. He trades on his family name and treats people badly. This academy can do better." Mr. Hartley was walking toward them now, his face lined with stress but also something that looked like determination. Victor trailed behind him, looking smaller somehow, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "Dr. Chen, Elena," Mr. Hartley began, then stopped, seeming unsure how to continue. He took a breath and started again. "First, Elena, I owe you an apology. What happened tonight should never have occurred. You were put in an uncomfortable position, humiliated in front of our guests, and I should have stopped it immediately." Elena noticed he didn't look at his nephew as he said this, but Victor flinched anyway. "However," Mr. Hartley continued, "what we witnessed tonight was extraordinary. Dr. Chen has been telling me about your background, your training, your potential. I had no idea we had someone of your caliber working here. That's part of the problem, isn't it?" Dr. Chen interjected, her voice sharp. "You had no idea because you never looked. You never saw her as anything more than someone who cleaned your floors. How many other talented people do you think are invisible to you?" Mr. Hartley had the grace to look uncomfortable. "You're right, of course, which is why I'd like to make this right if I can." He turned to Elena directly. "I'd like to offer you a full scholarship to complete a graduate degree in piano performance. We have an excellent program here, as you know. You could study while continuing to work, or we could arrange something more flexible." Elena's breath caught. A scholarship, a real chance to finish what she'd started 2 decades ago. "And more than that," Mr. Hartley continued. "Once you've completed the degree, I'd like to offer you a position as an instructor. We need teachers who have real passion, real understanding of what music means, not just technical skill." This time he did glance at Victor, who looked at the floor. "That's a start," Dr. Chen said, nodding approvingly. "But Elena has a daughter to support. She needs to survive while she's studying. The scholarship needs to include a living stipend." "Of course," Mr. Hartley agreed quickly. "We can arrange that." Elena felt dizzy. This was too much, happening too fast. Just 3 hours ago she'd been filling water glasses and trying to be invisible. Now people were talking about scholarships and teaching positions and stipends like it was simple, like her whole life could just change in an instant. "I need to think about it," Elena heard herself say. "I need to talk to my daughter." It's a lot." "Of course, take all the time you need," Mr. Hartley said. "But please know the offer is genuine. What you showed us tonight, that's what this academy should be about. That's what music should be about." Victor finally spoke up, his voice subdued. "I'm sorry. What I did was wrong. I was trying to be funny, trying to impress my friends, and I didn't think about how it would make you feel. I was a jerk." Elena looked at him. His apology felt real, but she could also see that he still didn't fully understand. He was sorry he'd been caught, sorry there were consequences, but she wasn't sure he truly grasped the weight of what he'd done. The assumption that she was less than him, that her dignity was worth less than his entertainment. "I appreciate the apology," she said carefully. "But I hope you learned something from this. Everyone has a story. Everyone deserves respect, regardless of what job they do." Victor nodded, but Elena noticed he still couldn't quite meet her eyes. Mr. Hartley's expression suggested that he and his nephew would be having a much longer conversation later. The gala was winding down now. Guests were beginning to leave, though many of them stopped to speak to Elena first. Business cards piled up in Dr. Chen's hands. Invitations to perform at charity events. Requests for private concerts. Offers to help however they could. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Finally, around 11 o'clock, Elena was able to slip away to the staff area. She needed a moment alone, needed to process everything that had happened. She sat on a bench in the hallway, her head in her hands, trying to steady her breathing. Robert found her there a few minutes later. "Hey," he said gently, sitting down beside her. "You doing okay?" "I don't know," Elena admitted. "I don't know what I am." "You're amazing," Robert said simply. "We all knew you were special, but that was something else. I'm proud of you. We all are." Elena felt tears starting again. "I'm scared," she whispered. "What if I can't do it? What if I take this chance and I fail? What if I'm not as good as I used to be? What if my daughter needs me and I'm not there because I'm chasing some dream I should have let go of years ago?" "Or," Robert said, "what if you succeed? What if you show your daughter that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be? What if you give her permission to chase her own dreams by chasing yours?" They sat in silence for a moment. From the grand hall, Elena could hear the last strains of music as the final student performed. The gala was ending, but something new was beginning. She could feel it, terrifying and exciting in equal measure. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from her daughter, asking how work was going, saying she'd made dinner and saved some for her mom, asking if everything was okay because Elena usually texted back by now. Elena smiled through her tears. Her daughter, her brilliant, beautiful daughter who'd never once complained about their small apartment or their tight budget, or the fact that her mom worked 2 jobs, who'd grown up seeing her mother sacrifice everything, and had somehow turned out kind and strong anyway. She typed back, "Everything is okay. Better than okay. I have something amazing to tell you when I get home. I love you so much." Then she stood up, smoothed down her uniform and walked back out to help with the cleanup. Tomorrow she would think about scholarships and teaching positions and second chances. Tomorrow she would figure out what this all meant and whether she was brave enough to try again. But tonight she was still Elena the cleaning woman, with a job to finish and a daughter waiting at home. Except now she was also Elena the pianist. Elena the woman who'd made a room full of strangers stand and cheer. Elena the person who'd reminded everyone, including herself, that she was so much more than anyone had assumed. She caught her reflection in a window as she passed. She looked the same as she had that morning. Same uniform, same face, same person. But somehow everything was different now. She could see it in her own eyes. Something that had been sleeping for 20 years had woken up, and there was no putting it back to sleep now. The question was, what would she do with it? Elena didn't get home until almost 1 in the morning. The apartment was quiet when she walked in. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. Her daughter, Claire, had fallen asleep on the couch waiting for her, a textbook open on her lap. She was 16, all long limbs and determination, working hard to keep her grades up so she could get into a good college on scholarship, just like her mother had once done. Elena stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching her daughter sleep. This was who she'd made all her choices for. This beautiful, smart, kind person who'd never asked to be born into struggle, but had handled it with more grace than Elena thought possible. "Mom?" Claire stirred, blinking awake. "What time is it?" "I tried to wait up." "Late, sweetheart. You should be in bed." Elena sat down beside her, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the evening was finally wearing off. "How was the gala? Did everything go okay?" Claire asked, then stopped. She was looking at her mother's face more closely now. "Mom, have you been crying?" "What happened?" And so Elena told her. Everything. About Victor putting her on the spot, about playing in front of all those people, about Dr. Chen recognizing her, about the scholarship offer and the teaching position. Claire listened with wide eyes, her mouth falling open, interrupting with gasps and questions and exclamations of disbelief. "Wait, so you just sat down and played? In front of everyone? And they loved it?" Claire was gripping her mother's hand now, squeezing tight. "Mom, that's incredible. That's amazing. Why didn't you tell me you could play like that?" "I don't know," Elena said honestly. "I guess I thought that part of my life was over. I didn't want to make you feel bad about what I'd given up. I didn't want you to feel like you were the reason I stopped. But I was the reason," Claire said quietly. "No." Elena turned to face her daughter directly. "My choices were the reason. My love for you was the reason, and I've never regretted it, not for 1 second. But maybe I convinced myself that I had to choose between being your mother and being a musician. Maybe I didn't have to give up everything." They talked until 3 in the morning, sitting on that worn couch in their small living room. Claire wanted to know everything about the music, about Dr. Chen, about what Elena was going to do now. And Elena found herself admitting things she'd barely admitted to herself. That she was scared. That she didn't know if she was good enough anymore. That part of her wanted to just say no to everything and keep life simple and safe. "Mom," Claire said finally, "you're always telling me to chase my dreams, to not let fear stop me. You push me to apply to good colleges even though we don't know how we'll pay for them. You tell me I can do anything if I work hard enough. But you won't take your own advice." Elena smiled through fresh tears. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best," Claire said, hugging her tight. "Take the scholarship, Mom. Teach at the academy. Show everyone what you can do. Show me what happens when you don't give up on yourself." 3 days later, Elena sat in Mr. Hartley's office, officially accepting the offer. Dr. Chen was there too, having appointed herself as Elena's unofficial advisor and advocate. They worked out the details. Elena would start classes in the fall. taking 2 courses at a time while working reduced hours at the academy. The stipend would cover what she'd lose in wages. After 2 years, if all went well, she'd transition to a full teaching position. "There's one more thing," Dr. Chen said, pulling out a folder. "I've been making some calls. Several venues want you to perform. Charity events mostly, at least to start. They don't pay much, but they'd give you visibility. Help you build a reputation again." Elena looked through the papers, her hands trembling slightly. These were real opportunities. Real stages. The kind of chances she'd stopped dreaming about years ago. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. "You're ready," Dr. Chen said firmly. "You were ready 20 years ago and you're ready now. The only difference is now you have something extra to bring to the music. Experience. Depth. The knowledge of what it costs to lose something and find it again." As for Victor, he was asked to resign by the end of that week. The board decided that his behavior, combined with ongoing complaints from students, made him unsuitable to continue teaching. Elena heard he took a position at his father's company, far away from music education. She felt a complicated mix of emotions about it. She didn't want to ruin anyone's life, but she also knew that some people needed to learn that actions had consequences. The academy itself began to change in small but important ways. Mr. Hartley established a new policy of regular check-ins with all staff, not just faculty. They created a scholarship fund specifically for non-traditional students, people who'd left music and wanted to return. Elena's story had opened eyes to how much talent might be hidden in plain sight. The next few months were a whirlwind. Elena balanced her reduced cleaning shifts with increasingly demanding coursework. Her fingers, which had played only in private for so long, had to readjust to practicing multiple hours a day. There were moments of frustration when her hands couldn't do what her mind remembered. Times when she wanted to quit, when the gap between who she'd been and who she was now seemed too wide to cross. But Claire was always there, doing her homework at the kitchen table while Elena practiced on her old keyboard, cheering her on through the hard parts. And Dr. Chen checked in weekly, offering guidance and encouragement and occasionally tough love when Elena needed it most. 6 months after the gala, Elena gave her first real performance. It was at a fundraiser for a children's hospital. Nothing fancy, but the room was full and the piano was good. Claire sat in the front row beaming with pride. Dr. Chen was there too, along with Robert and several other staff members from the academy who'd become genuine friends. Elena was nervous as she walked on stage, her hands sweating, her heart pounding. But when she sat at the piano and placed her fingers on the keys, something settled inside her. This was where she belonged. This was who she was. Not just a mother, not just a former prodigy, not just someone who cleaned floors. She was all of those things, and the combination made her music richer than it had ever been before. She played beautifully that night. Not perfectly. There were small mistakes that only she probably noticed, but with real emotion and genuine connection. When she finished, the applause was warm and enthusiastic. A local music blogger who'd been in attendance wrote a review calling her a rediscovered treasure and a pianist who plays with the wisdom of someone who's lived. More opportunities followed. Bigger venues, better pay. Elena started teaching a few students on the side, discovering that she loved sharing music as much as making it. Her story began to spread, picked up by local news and then a national magazine. The cleaning woman who became a concert pianist read one headline. Elena didn't love being reduced to a soundbite, but she understood that her story meant something to people. It gave them hope that it was never too late, that dreams deferred didn't have to mean dreams destroyed. 2 years after that night at the gala, Elena walked across a stage again, this time to receive her graduate degree. Claire was there, now preparing for her own college journey with several scholarship offers. Dr. Chen stood and cheered louder than anyone when Elena's name was called. The following semester, Elena began her first term as a full-time instructor at Riverside Music Academy. Her practice room, number 7, the one she used to clean every evening, became known as a special place. Students sought her out not just because she was talented, but because she understood struggle. She knew what it meant to want something desperately and not be able to have it. She knew what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be judged by circumstances rather than character. She made it a point to learn the names of all the staff members, to say good morning to the people who cleaned the floors and served the food and kept the building running. She established a small emergency fund for students dealing with family crises, having been there herself. She fought for more diversity in the program, for more scholarships, for more chances for people who didn't fit the traditional mold. And sometimes, late at night when the building was empty, Elena would walk down to the grand performance hall where it all changed. She'd stand on that stage and remember the terror and humiliation of that moment, and how it had transformed into something beautiful. She'd remember Victor's cruel smile and how it had accidentally opened a door she'd thought was locked forever. Life wasn't perfect. Money was still tight sometimes. Balancing teaching and performing and being a mother was exhausting. There were days when Elena missed the simplicity of just cleaning and going home, when the pressure of expectations felt too heavy. But then she'd sit at a piano, or watch one of her students have a breakthrough, or see Claire pursuing her own dreams with fierce determination. And Elena would remember why it was all worth it. She'd remember that moment of deciding to be brave, to try again, to believe that she was worth more than she'd been settling for. She'd been given a second chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. Not the music, not the teaching, not the opportunity to show people that their stories didn't have to end where they thought they did. That sometimes humiliation could turn into triumph. That sometimes the worst moments could become the beginning of something extraordinary. And every time Elena played now, she played for all the versions of herself. For the teenager who'd won competitions, for the young woman who'd sacrificed everything for family, for the cleaning woman who'd never stopped loving music, and for the person she was becoming, someone who contained all those stories and was somehow more complete because of them. The music had never left her. It had just been waiting for the right moment to come back, and when it did, it came back stronger than ever before.